Hello friends, my name is Steve Guttenberg and I am the Audiophiliac, and today it is all about the ATOHM GT1 HD stand mount speaker. Now, who is ATOHM? Well, it's a small French speaker company. They design and build their speakers, including their drivers, in France. And they also sell speaker kits. But I'm just focusing on this one, the GT1 HD. Now it is part of a line, the GT line, so there are two floor standing speakers and also a center channel speaker. It's a two-way bass reflex design, but instead of a front port or a rear port, it actually has a down firing port into a plinth that is integrated, plinth base that's integrated into the design of the cabinet itself. Now, this is a first for me in a speaker review, is that this is a speaker that actually has knob feel. Now, I usually refer to knob feel in preamplifiers, but in this case, the knob is on the speaker itself. On the back, it is basically a tweeter level control that goes, it's a 3-position knob from -2 dB to 0 dB or plus 3 dB. And it's a very useful device. I'll talk about that later on in the review. The crossover network is unusual. It's a 6 dB per octave slope, which is a shallower slope than most, meaning there's more crossover in frequencies between the tweeter and woofer than a typical 12 dB or 18 dB per octave crossover. And also there's a time delay part of the crossover that aligns the tweeter and woofer in time. That's pretty cool. Actually, can't think of any other speaker that I reviewed lately that has that feature. The cabinet, in case you're wondering, the cabinet is MDF. That's ordinary, but it's beautifully crafted. The finishes are rosewood, which is what I have here, gloss black, or gloss white. Now the tweeter is a 28mm silk dome, and the woofer is a 6-inch unit with a cast frame. I'm going to put up the specs right now and also mention that the GT1 HD comes with a 5-year warranty, and the price is $4,499 a pair in each of the 3 finishes. Setup was pretty straightforward. I had the speakers on 28-inch tall stands, and they were about 18 inches away from the wall behind them. The amplifiers included, well, the Schiit Agir, 20-watt, more or less Class A amplifier, and alternatively, I also used a Mytek Brooklyn amp, which is a 250-watt a channel Class D design. To be blunt, I think the Agir was a little underpowered for the speakers, so I spent most of my time, it sounded really nice, but it was a little underpowered, felt it was inhibiting dynamics, so most of the time I was using the Mytek Brooklyn power amp. Now, to get started listening, oh, before I forget to mention it, yes, there will be an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day at the conclusion of today's show. First recording that I played for this review was a really good place to start. It was Macy Gray, great singer, and the name of the album is Stripped. It was recorded live to 2-track here in New York City in a church. It is a 100% audiophile recording, and by that I mean there was no dynamic range compression used in the recording, mixing, or mastering of this record. There was no equalization. Pretty much what went down at the session is what winds up in the final product, which, by the way, you can now stream on Tidal. I just checked. It is now available on Tidal, so you can hear it for yourself if you have Tidal. And I think Spotify, but I'm not so sure about Spotify. I got to say, Macy Gray really seemed to be enjoying the process of recording this way, because she's made most of her records in a studio where you can fix every little mistake and change things and mess around with them. When you record live to 2-track, it's pretty much done. When you step away from the microphone, she was done. There was nothing else she was going to do or add or change. And she liked that challenge. So she was into it. And it's a simple recording with acoustic bass, electric guitar, drums. I'm pretty sure that's it. And anyway, the songs are great. Her performances are great. So here's the thing that's so cool about this record is that because it was recorded live to 2-track with one microphone, one stereo microphone, the spatial relationships between her And the bass and the drums and the electric guitar, that's what was going down at the session itself. In other words, it wasn't mixed that way to sound that way. That's what it was. And the GT1 HD did a phenomenal job at reproducing that space of her, the band, and in this beautiful acoustic of this church. The tweeter was really good. The shimmer of the cymbals, just the delicacy, the metallic quality of the cymbals was very clear, very well played over this speaker. The next record is kind of hard to describe. The album is called Dawn of Midi. It's piano, bass, and drums, all acoustic. And it's a very intricately arranged record that makes the instruments sound like they are loops, like tape loops, because they just have patterns that repeat over and over again. But they're not at all loops. It's an all analog recording as far as I can recall. And they just arranged it to sound that way. So it's very difficult to play, but it's mesmerizing. And the deep bass coming out of the GT1 HDs was very impressive, very fast, very clear, and surprisingly deep for a speaker of this size. So anyway, Dawn of Midi, it's a really interesting record. It's almost like ambient, because you just hear these patterns repeating and evolving and changing over the course of the music. As a matter of fact, the band played the entire recording, almost an hour of the recording, without stopping. So the whole record is one complete take, as I recall. I'm pretty sure that's what went down at the session. So then I was into this Arcade Fire mode. Now I love Arcade Fire's music, especially their first 3 or 4 albums, but I don't think their albums sound very good. They're too crowded. There's too much going on and not enough clarity to back it up. They tend to be very digital, grainy, harsh sounding recordings, but they're great and the music's really good. But anyway, so I used Arcade Fire as an excuse to try out that tweeter level control. So I was usually listening to everything else at the 0 dB setting, but for Arcade Fire, I brought it down to -2 dB, which really did a nice job. You wouldn't think 2 dB would make that big of a difference, but it made enough of a difference to continue listening to Arcade Fire. So it actually does come in really handy. So yeah, I never really had much use for the +3 dB setting on the tweeter level control, but if your room is kind of on the dark side, meaning has a lot of very absorbent surfaces in it and a thick rug and thick padded couch and all that kind of stuff, or your amp is on the soft side and you want a little extra zip, yeah, you probably want to try out that +3 dB setting. Of course, I know you could also get an equalizer and accomplish the same thing, but in this case it's built into the speaker and it's so easy to use, why not? So I think depending on the kind of recordings you play, harsh recordings or even dull recordings, you will find use for that tone control. Now at this point, I decided for a comparison speaker, I brought out the Buckhart S400 Mark II speaker. I just reviewed it like 2 months ago or something. Still have it here. It's on a short-term loan. And I compared the two, the Buckhart versus the ATOHM. Well, I got to say, considering the difference in price, that the Buckhart is essentially half the price of the GT1 HD, the competition was actually pretty good. Now, I will say that the Buckhart speaker is a warmer, fuller, richer sounding speaker. Not as clear and not as detailed. But even so, it's a really, really good speaker. I love it. It's really very, very impressive speaker. But switching over to the GT1 HD, the sound just had more snap to it, more life to it. The transient response improved. The dynamics, had a little more kick to them. And the bass on the ATOHM, by the way, is really amazing for a speaker of its size, because it's not just big, it's tight, it's fast. It's a very well composed speaker. So the ATOHM versus Buckhart comparison kind of went where I thought it was going to go. That the Buckhart is a beautiful sounding speaker. I would say on the euphonic side of neutral. But it makes everything sound so nice and really just very enjoyable listen. But the ATOHM just gives you more resolution and clarity. So to change the subject for just a second, I was listening to the Bob Lefsetz's podcast. He was interviewing Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. He does a lot of interviews with musicians. So it put me in the mood to listen to some Jethro Tull, and I wound up listening to Aqualung live. Now this was a studio recording live in front of an audience, but it was done for Sirius XM radio in 2004, I believe. So it's many years after the original, and they basically played the entire album from start to finish. And then they do, on the recording itself, they talk about how the sessions went down, which is cool. It's sort of the making of Aqualung. But in any case, the sound quality of that recording wasn't that great. It was a bit too bright and a little too transistory and hard sounding, but the liveness of it really shone through, and you could tell that Ian Anderson and the band were having a good time doing this. So I'm digging that. I'm listening to that, and for that I did have the tone control down 2 dB. But then I thought I should just listen to the album Aqualung, the remix that Steven Wilson did, and I put that on, and it was like, whoa, now that one sounds really good. Steven Wilson's remixes are phenomenal. I mean, he just really improved the sound of the original master tapes, as they say. And I'm doing all this with the ATOHM speakers, and I was having a really good time. Okay, so now we're going to do, so Steve, what do you really think? Well, I think the ATOHM GT1 HD is a high resolution speaker. If you're into clarity and you want to hear every detail in the recording, this one will be of interest to you. I mean, the balance from bass, mids, and highs is very smooth in terms of it's not like it's all about the mid-range or it's all about the highs. No, in this case, the GT1 HD gives you bass, mids, and treble all at very high resolution levels. Yeah. And also there's that 3D quality to the sound stage. It's very, very impressive. Being layering and space, very precisely laid out, great center focus. Yeah, this speaker does clarity, but it has soul. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying when you listen, you just hear more detail coming from the sound of these speakers. And it's effortless. It's not like it's in your face, overdone, a bit too much. No, you never feel like it's too much. It's just that it's what it's capable of that's so impressive. And now we're going to move on to the next section, which is the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. This one comes from Greg. He lives in Connecticut and enjoys a wide range of music, including rock, some jazz, and contemporary. With his recent upgrades, he now considers himself a true audiophile. He's ripped all of his CDs to his server and really enjoys streaming internet radio and MQA content from Tidal. He says the sound is awesome. But, here's the thing, whenever Greg demos his system, he likes to play vinyl. So as for the details of his system, he has a Technics SL G3 networking digital integrated amplifier, a Technics ST G30 music server, and a Technics SL 1500C turntable. There's an Audiophiliac 2M Black on the table, and his phono preamp is, I'm going to mispronounce this, an Oyade Neo D Plus. Okay. As for the speakers, he has JBL L100 New Classics, and those are on JBL L100 speaker stands. Cables are by AudioQuest, and there's a vintage custom woodwork design equipment rack and a vintage Monster power conditioner. Nice going, Greg. Okay, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the Audiophiliac. If you like what I'm doing here on the show, please hit that like button that is right under the picture here, right there, right down there. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, I don't know if you've heard, but I have a new thing. It's called the Audiophiliac Podcast. Just started a couple of weeks ago. It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts, a lot of different places. And if you're not into the whole podcast thing, that's a new thing for you. Don't worry about it. You can hear it on my website. You just Google Audiophiliac Podcast and you will get there. And also there's a link to it directly below in the description. If you'd like to support the show, here's how. Check out my Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/audiophiliac. And Patreon now accepts payment in dollars, pounds, and euros. And with that, I could say my work here is at last complete. So thank you so much for watching. And I'd love to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.